Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the APhA-ASP Chapter Delegate Orientation webinar. Throughout the webinar tonight, it will be recorded for anything that might happen at a later date if you would like to go through this. We are just about ready to get started here. So my name is Dylan Atkinson. I'm the current APhA-ASP Speaker of the House. I would just like to start off by going through a few webinar procedures. So what you should be able to see is, first of all, you will be in listen-only mode for the majority of this webinar. However, we do ask that if you do plan on speaking, to use the telephone, as it tends to be a little bit more predictable and a little bit less grainy to use. In addition, we also ask that you mute yourself, in addition to already being muted at any time that you aren't speaking, just to turn down any kind of background noise for anybody. Additionally, please follow along with the PowerPoint as we're going through everything. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the box for the Q&A portion. You should also see a little function for a raise hand icon. What that'll do is that'll give us a signal to let us know that we should unmute you, and we'll give you an opportunity to vocally ask your questions. And we'll be taking those at the Q&A portion, and if you do have any questions that pop up, please feel free to type them into the box as we're going. So a little bit about our agenda tonight. First thing that we're going to do is we're just going to go over your role as in the APhA-ASP House of Delegates. And with that, we're also going to go through your role as the chapter delegate. Additionally, we will be going over some of the policy events at APhA annual meeting, and a little bit of an overview of Robert's Rules of Order, including voting, amendments, call the previous question, as well as a whole bunch of other helpful tips that will help you get through annual meeting. Additionally, we'll be going over even more tips and talking about some of the resources that are available to you. And then we actually have some special guests on the call with us as well, who are going to be jumping in later in the webinar to kind of go through a mock resolutions debate and a mock elections debate, so you can kind of hear what it's going to be like, especially for any of you first-timers out there. Additionally, we will have time for questions and discussion, and we'll be doing that not only at the end, but also basically at the end of each one of these chapters, if you will. So with that, we can kind of dive right into it and start off with the APhA-ASP mission. And within the APhA-ASP mission, it says to be the collective voice of student pharmacists, to provide opportunities for professional growth, to improve patient care, and to envision and advance the future of pharmacy. And this be the collective voice of student pharmacists is really what we're getting at with the APhA-ASP House of Delegates. And through this process, through having that idea and going through the entire policy process, this is our way to show that we are the collective voice of student pharmacists, by bringing student pharmacists from all around the world, from many different backgrounds together to talk about these ideas and find out how we as an academy really do feel about these issues. Now, our policy process, we have a lot of delegate materials for you. Some of these are going to include the proposed resolutions, which are now posted on the website, as well as our resolutions book, which is our policy book. And this has every single policy that has ever been passed by the APhA-ASP House of Delegates. And that's also available online for you guys to sift through and kind of get an idea of some of the positions that we have had that are now archived and we deem a little bit inactive. We also have our APhA-ASP House of Delegates guide. And basically what this is meant to do is this is supposed to show you the way that the House of Delegates will work. And this has all of the different rules of procedures kind of covered in that as well. Additionally, we also will have our agenda, which we will go through at the annual meeting, and we'll be able to go through, and you'll see all the things that we should be talking about within the House of Delegates. Additionally, we'll be going through how do you approach the mic. We'll be talking about that one, as well as have some resources available for you on that as well. Additionally, we have a Robert's Rules of Order cheat sheet, and as you guys may already know, or you will be finding out soon, Robert's Rules of Order has a lot of rules, but don't be scared about them. They all make sense. They all work very well together, and we'll be utilizing them very soon now as we get closer to the APhA annual meeting. Additionally, we have our new business item form, which I'll go into a little bit more, and then our APhA-ASP mock debate scripts, which I touched upon earlier, which we'll go over at the end of this. So your role as your chapter's delegate is really to represent your chapter and serve as your chapter's voice. Additionally, this is your way to facilitate discussion among the different chapters before and even at APhA 2017. So as your chapter delegate, talk on your local level about these issues. Find out what the problems are. Reach out to other chapters and reach out to the chapter who initially proposed this. Reach out to your regional delegates and ask them a little bit more about, what do we want from this? I have a question about this one specific point. Additionally, it's really, we really encourage you guys, and it's your role as a delegate, to encourage chapter participation in both the open hearing on proposed resolutions and also for the new business items. This is the opportunity for any chapter member to get up and voice their own opinion, whether it be on behalf of their chapter or on behalf of themselves. It's their opportunity to get up there, ask any questions, bring up any points, anything like that. Additionally, as your chapter's delegate, you can also submit any kind of amendments or new business items throughout the annual meeting, and we'll go into that in a little bit. And of course, you always want to have fun, get involved in the process, and most importantly, get somebody else involved in the process as well. So first things first, we want to make sure that everybody has signed up to be your chapter delegate. So the online chapter delegate form has been emailed out to everybody. If you have not received that email, please let myself know or Keith Marciniak. Both of our contact information will be in this webinar and also on pharmacists.com. We really want to make sure that you can register as your chapter's delegate. This actually has to be completed by 11:59 p.m. And that's Pacific time for everybody out on the West Coast, and that's on Friday, March 22nd. The information for that is actually available at the APhA-ASP House of Delegates page, and that's at pharmacist.com/APhA-ASP-House-Delegates. Additionally, there's some more resources that you can use through the APhA 2017 annual meeting website, which is listed right there. So about the policy process timeline at annual meeting. So the policy process is ever ongoing throughout the entire year. But specifically at annual meeting, we really have these three main days. On Friday, that's when we have our new business items actually being due at 8:30 a.m. On Saturday, this is your opportunity at the open hearing on proposed resolutions and new business to really get your chapter members to get up there and ask questions and get involved and voice their opinions on the resolutions and new business items. In addition, this is when the reference committee meets and actually produces their report, and this is where our first House of Delegates session will be. On Sunday, we will actually be having our final House of Delegates session, as well as our national officer elections. So on Saturday, that's when a lot of the business happens. That's where a lot of the discussion happens. And then on Sunday, that's when the actual elections will be happening. So the open hearing on proposed resolutions and new business is actually Saturday at 7:30 a.m. to 8:45 a.m. in the Convention Center in the Gateway Ballroom. It's kind of an open mic type setting. And what we mean by that is that all student pharmacists, members, and even non-members have the opportunity to share their opinions and really let your voice be heard. After that, I do want to talk about the APhA-ASP Reference Committee for the purpose that I did bring it up. The Reference Committee is actually comprised of the 8 regional members at large, and it's chaired by the APhA-ASP Speaker of the House. On Saturday morning, they will be meeting in closed sessions, and they're taking all of the comments and all of the discussion around the open hearing on proposed resolutions and new business items, and they'll be discussing them and taking those comments into account. And then they'll make one of 4 recommendations to the APhA-ASP House of Delegates. These 4 recommendations are listed right there in their adoption, rejection, adoption as amended, and then referral of the resolution to the National Executive Committee. They make these 4 recommendations, and those are the recommendations that we actually vote on the next day on the final session. The reports will be made available Saturday at noon via the APhA 2017 meeting app and the APhA-ASP House of Delegates webpage, and that'll give you opportunities to kind of see what we'll be talking about in the upcoming day. Next, we have our new business review committee. So if there is an idea that you've seen hasn't really come up, it hasn't gone through the MRMs or anything, but you feel it important enough that APhA-ASP needs to discuss it, we do have the new business review committee, and this is the opportunity for anybody to submit a new business item and have it reviewed by the committee before it goes to the APhA-ASP House of Delegates. Once again, this will meet in closed session on Saturday morning. This is 8 regional representatives as well as an ex officio chair that is appointed by the APhA-ASP National Executive Committee. Once again, this committee can make one of 4 recommendations. They're the exact same recommendations as the reference committee can make, as we just discussed, and that's adoption, rejection, adoption as amended, and then referral. And this report will also be available at the same time as the reference committee report at being noon via the app as well as on the webpage. So new business items. All of these ones will have to be filed Friday, March 24th at 3 p.m. Pacific time, which is 48 hours before the APhA-ASP House of Delegates final session, and that's because of our House of Delegates rules of procedure. Please submit your items to myself via dylanatkinson2017@gmail.com. There is a form that can be found on the APhA-ASP House of Delegates webpage, and I do ask that you fill that out completely, and that'll help me to make sure that it is all filed away and that the new business item really gets the recognition and the thought that you put into it, and if it is filled out completely. We will be bringing an electronic, a physical copy of it with us to the new business hearing, as well as for the new business committee, but we do ask that everybody bring an electronic copy up to the stage by 7 a.m. on Saturday prior to the open hearing, just to make sure that we have it and make sure that the language that we have is correct, because we want to make sure that nothing kind of gets jumbled up. So some house rules. With the APhA-ASP House of Delegates, only the chapter delegates are allowed to vote in both sessions, and chapter delegates have to be present in both sessions in order to vote. Only the chapter delegates or the alternative delegates are allowed to debate and vote on the proposed resolutions and new business items. The alternative delegates can serve in place of the chapter delegate when needed. However, they do need to check in with the credentials committee table. And the vote that they actually make is on the recommendations of the APhA-ASP reference committee, which we'll go into in a little bit. So our first session will be held Saturday, March 25th from 3 to 5 in the Gateway Ballroom. Delegate registration will begin at 2:15, and all delegates must be seated by 2:55 to make sure that we get started on time and that everything runs smoothly. Our agenda will look something along the lines of recognizing the new APhA-ASP chapters and charter presentation. We'll have the National President's Address, the selection of the APhA-ASP PharmFlix Video Contest award-winning chapters, and updates from the APhA-ASP standing committees. At this point, we can also start debating and voting on the resolutions if time permits. And we should have all of the proposed resolutions completed and voted on by that point. However, if not, during our final session on Sunday, we should have more time to continue our discussion on the proposed resolutions, as well as hear the APhA Government Affairs report. In addition, we will be presenting the APhA Good Government Student Pharmacist of the Year Award and discussing and voting on any new business items. In addition, this is also where the elections happen for the 2017-2018 APhA-ASP National Officers, and we will be hearing the APhA-ASP National President's inaugural address. So this is a really big day. It's at the same exact time. It'll just be on Sunday. Once again, registration actually will not begin at 8 o'clock a.m. I do apologize for that one. That was a typo on my part. It should, I'm sorry, I actually did fix it. It'll begin at 2:15, and they should all be seated once again by 2:55. I will say on Sunday, right before our final session, is the leadership training series, which is happening in the same room immediately before. So although it does say registration begins at 2:15 and everybody needs to be seated by 2:55, we're going to make sure that everybody gets checked in and seated and everything, but we do have a session in there right before for the leadership training series, and we'll make sure that everybody gets seated. So we do ask that everyone work with us to make sure that things run smoothly. So at this time, we will open it up for any questions about the events of APhA 2017. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in, as well as you can use the raise hand function if you do have a question. So the first question that I have is, the 20. So I apologize. There appears to be a typo in which the Friday session is actually the 24th, not the 22nd. So I apologize to everybody about the forms being due. So the forms will actually be due for the I apologize. The correct date for registration, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. The correct date for registration is the 22nd, which is a Wednesday. So I apologize that did say Friday, but we do ask that everybody have their chapter delegates submitted by Wednesday, the 22nd. Friday is when we do ask that all of the new business items be submitted by. Okay, and then I see a question to please clarify the required events and times again. So the required times and events, basically throughout the weekend, our major ones are going to be our open hearing on the proposed resolutions and new business items, which is going to be Saturday from 7:30 to 8:45 a.m. in the Gateway Ballroom at the Convention Center. Then we will have our first business session of the APhA-ASP House of Delegates, which is going to meet at 3 p.m. on Saturday, and that'll go until about 5 p.m. on Saturday. And then our next one will be the very next day, Sunday, from 3 to 5:30 p.m. for our final session. Alrighty. So I do not see any more questions at this time. So at this point, we will be moving on to talk a little bit about Robert's Rules of Order.
Actually, Dylan, we have a couple more questions here real quick. This is Keith Marciniak, APhA Student Development Staff Member. The first question is from Alan. He goes, I noticed that not all the resolutions passed from the MRM are in the proposed resolutions included in the email by Keith Marciniak. Are the resolutions in the report of the 2017 APhA-ASP Resolutions Committee full report only the ones being voted on and discussed? So do you mind if I just take 1 second to kind of go over that quickly?
Of course.
All right. So if you get a second, I'd highly encourage everybody to go to pharmacists.com and go to the House of Delegates webpage. You'll see a great picture here of Dylan, which I actually have hanging up on my wall in my office. But the report of the Resolutions Committee here, which is the full report, there's a couple different options. We've got one where it has everything in it. This includes the background statements as well as all of the wording for the policies. But we also made a community Word doc, which just has the policies in it. We included a PDF for you. So these are pretty much all the same that are in here. So if I pop that one open there, within here, it's kind of hard to see. But we do have each of the resolutions. So we'll be addressing 2017.1, which is the utilization of pharmacists and student pharmacists provided transition services, or care transition services. So the background information is there that the Resolutions Committee drafted. The second policy that we'll be discussing is mandatory e-prescribing of Schedule II controlled substances. And this is the policy right here, and then the background statements. And then the third policy that will be brought up in the House is the durable medical equipment and medical devices ease of access. There's two parts to that one, and then the background statement. And then the final policy that proposed resolution that the Resolutions Committee developed was the fourth one here, and that's the efforts to reduce mental health stigma, and there's three parts to that. So during the House session on the very first day, which will be Saturday afternoon from 3 to 5, we'll be going through each of these proposed resolutions. You'll have the opportunity to vote yay or nay. You'll have the opportunity to amend these. You'll be able to kind of discuss and debate each of those. All four of those will actually be discussed early on Saturday morning. We'll be discussing those during the open hearing on resolutions. And so one other item, in addition to those four proposed resolutions, the House will also consider two motions from the APhA-ASP Resolutions Committee. The first motion is to kind of have the policy committee go back and take a look and do some more work on PBM transparency. That was brought up quite a bit during the MRMs this year, and it was one of those issues that really made it to the forefront. However, we do have quite a few policies already on the books, as you can kind of see here, on PBM. So they didn't want to introduce a new proposed resolution on PBMs because it's kind of already covered, but the last time we passed something was in 2012, and so it might be time for the policy committee to go back and pull something up again and either work on it, bring it up to APHA's house, something along that lines. And then the same thing with prescription drug monitoring programs. The last time we passed something was in 2008, so it's still a good policy. However, the issue keeps coming up year after year about prescription drug monitoring programs and how we can improve those. So you'll be voting on 4 proposed resolutions, which was just mentioned there, and then the 2 motions. And to address Alan's questions, we had close to 100 different resolutions that were brought forward from all of the MRMs, and the Resolutions Committee had to meet in December. They had several conference calls, and then they came to APHA headquarters in Washington, D.C. to actually go through and talk about each of the proposed resolutions that were passed at the MRMs. And this is actually a full list here, can be found on that page, and it gives you an overview of how each of the proposed resolutions were considered. So we actually go through here, and you'll kind of see this is issue number 1. You'll see some of the issues have multiple policies into them because they were voted upon in multiple regions. But the way that you read this is, you see here there's a 2 and a D. You go up to this first page here, and it gives an example of how to read the policy. So it tells you that the number is the number of the issue, the region, past policy number, and then the example or the rank percentage. And the way that we kind of do things is we take a look and we give you a reason. So if there's a number 1 or a number 6, it tells you that the proposed resolution is a great idea and receives serious consideration and discussion, but we didn't move it forward, or maybe it wasn't viewed as a priority. That's number 5. And then the rank percentage is an A, B, C, D, or E. And what it does, it tells you where all the proposals ranked within the ranking for the overall resolutions committee. So you'll see quite a few of these. Let's go to that number 1 as an example. This was a 2D. So what this tells you is that it was a proposed resolution that was a good idea, but not a priority for APHA at that time, and then it ranked within the 61st to the 80th percentile overall. So that's kind of how you read those, Alan, and I encourage you to take a good look at the page here, because each of the reports from the Regional Business Forum from the MRMs are located here, and the work that the Resolutions Committee did can be found here. But if you're interested and maybe want to bring something forward, I encourage you, if you want, go and fill out the new business form, and you can actually submit a new business item, and that's actually found right here. And again, that's due by Friday, March 24th at 3 p.m., and that has to be emailed to Dylan, and that new business item form can be found there. So that also answers Oksana's question as well, to clarify the deadline for the new business submission. So right there on that House of Delegates page. And then to Roman's question, Roman wants to know if the PowerPoint and the agenda will be sent out to the delegates. We can definitely send it out to the delegates, but again, I encourage everybody to visit APHA-House or ASP-House.delegates, and all of that information can be found here along with tonight's PowerPoint. I'll post this right here in the scripts as well. So hopefully that'll answer a few of your questions there, and I apologize, Dylan, for jumping in. It just seemed a little easier to do it that way.
No, thank you so much. All righty. So that just about wraps it up with the questions for now. We're going to jump right back into the PowerPoint, and we will have opportunities for more questions at the end again. So if you have more questions, please feel free to keep typing them in, and we will address them when we get the chance. So moving along, the whole point of us going through Robert's Rules of Order, and Robert's Rules of Order is incredibly important for us, as that's kind of the basis of our rules in our House of Delegates. The purpose is that it promotes fairness, orderliness, and respect among individuals, even in disagreement, so that a collective voice may be formed. Kind of going right back to our APHA-ASP mission, and saying that collective voice. This really ensures that everybody, even if they do have differing opinions, they're talking to each other in a respectful way, and we're coming to basically an agreement about what our voice is. It's fair by ensuring that everybody who wants to be able to speak has the opportunity to speak. It actually requires a 2/3 vote to end any kind of debate. So if you're fed up with hearing people speak, you need 2/3 of the House to agree with you in order to stop the discussion. The orderliness really allows us to focus on one issue at a time, to keep it from getting totally out of control and having people proposing one thing when we're talking about a different resolution. Robert's Rules of Order really allows us to focus on one issue at a time to make sure that that is something that we're all on board with. And then respect is that you're always addressing the comments to the chair. In this case, it would be the APhA-ASP Speaker of the House. So anytime that you go up to the microphone to make a point, you'll always be speaking to the Speaker of the House. You'll never be speaking to another delegate and never saying, I think that you're wrong, and I think that your opinion is invalid. You'll be saying, I have a problem with this part because X, Y, Z, Mr. Speaker. And it really kind of allows for a more respectful air in case there is any kind of disagreement with any of our resolutions. So as a chapter delegate, you have a few different actions that you can take, and that's approaching a microphone, proposing an amendment, seconding an amendment, moving to end the debate, requesting a caucus, requesting information, nominating a candidate for national office from the floor, as well as voting. And this is on our business items, which is our resolutions, and all of that will be done via electronic voting. Well, they'll be done via electronic voting for the national officer elections. For the actual resolutions, they will be done by a voice vote. And what I mean by that, when I say approaching the microphone, there will be several microphones set up in the APhA-ASP House of Delegates, and they'll all be numbered. So what you'll do when you have something that you want to say is you'll walk up to one of the microphones and you will wait. And you'll wait to be acknowledged by microphone number. At that point, you will say, Mr. Speaker, and then you'll state your first name and your last name, your chapter name, and then you'll say, speaking on behalf of either yourself or on behalf of your chapter. If you're in support of something, then say, my chapter rises in support of this resolution because, and then state your case. Or I rise in support of this resolution because. On the flip side, if it's something that you don't necessarily agree with, some of the wording is right there for you, and that's my chapter rises in opposition, or I rise in opposition of this resolution because X, Y, Z. We do ask that everybody be brief, seeing as that we only have about 2 hours to get through all of our different agenda items for the House of Delegates session. So we want to make sure that everybody has a chance to speak and that we're not there throughout the night because these discussions can really go on. So we do ask everybody to be brief at this time. We will have a handout that'll give you a little bit more information on how to approach the microphone that you will be receiving. If you want to propose any kind of amendment, and an amendment is any kind of changing to the wording of a resolution, and with this, it may or may not change the intent of the resolutions. We do ask that you fill out an amendment form and turn it into staff by 2 p.m. on Saturday. And basically, this is you will hand in the forms prior to the session, and that makes it a lot easier for staff to type up your wording and have it ready for you, ready to go to be put up on the screen during the session. Amendments are really only necessary if they actually change the intent of the resolution. If it's a minor wordsmithing thing, you are more than welcome to bring it to the floor. It's just that the ones that tend to have a little bit more success are ones that really change the intent of the resolution or change the meaning of something within the resolution. So if you want to make an amendment to one of the resolutions, you'll walk up to the microphone, you'll wait to be acknowledged, and then you'll say, Mr. Speaker, first name, last name, chapter name. I move to suspend House rules for the purposes of an amendment. Now at this point, what is required is that you require a second, and that is one of the other chapter delegates will have to yell second, and they don't have to get up to the microphone to say it. They can just yell it from their seat. You don't have to raise your hand or anything. If you hear that somebody wants to make an amendment and you agree with them and you want to hear their reasoning for why they're making that amendment, you shout second from your seat. At that point, suspending the House rules, which is something that you have to do for the purposes of an amendment, it actually requires a 2/3 majority vote. So 2/3 of the APhA-ASP House of Delegates actually has to vote to allow the amendment to be discussed. So before we even get to whether or not we agree with the amendment or anything like that, we have to vote on whether or not we're suspending House rules for the purposes of talking about an amendment, and that requires a 2/3 vote. Now, if the motion to suspend House rules passes, then the debate and vote on the amendment will actually occur. So if you get 2/3 of the APhA-ASP House of Delegates to agree with you and to vote with you that yes, we should suspend House rules for the purposes of an amendment, then we will talk about the actual amendment itself and the wording that is being changed. And this is all done through a stepwise process that is very well summed up by this graphic. It looks a little bit confusing, but I assure you that it is factual and accurate. So the first thing that would happen is that you have your original motion, and that's the first square right there. And the first action that you'll take is you'll have a vote to suspend House rules, and that's for the purposes of the amendment, and that takes a 2/3 majority in order to get to that amendment. So if 2/3 of the House agree with you and they say, yes, let's suspend House rules for the purposes of the amendment, we introduce the amendment. And at that point, we can actually vote on the amendment. If the amendment passes, if we vote yes on it, then the amendment takes over as our new resolution, and then we return to that first square that says original motion and vote on that original motion. However, if we say no to the amendment, so if we vote to suspend House rules with a 2/3 majority, but then we do not have a majority on the amendment, then we will go back to the original wording and continue discussing the original wording of the resolution or whatever the wording was before we entered into that amendment. Now, there is a thing called a secondary amendment that can also happen. So there's the primary amendment, which is typically what we'll see, and that somebody wants to change something, they want to take something out, they want to add something in, and that's when you have your vote for 2/3 majority to get to that primary amendment. And if we open up discussion on this primary amendment and somebody decides that they want to change something about the wording that we're talking about right now within that amendment, you can motion for suspending House rules for the purposes of a secondary amendment. And once again, that requires a 2/3 majority to get to the secondary amendment. And then we can talk about the secondary amendment language of the primary amendment and whether or not that language is necessary to the amendment. If that passes, we go back to the regular amendment and we talk about if the amendment as a whole is necessary. And then if we vote yes or no, we go back to that original motion and say this is now the resolution. Secondary amendments, the big things to remember with this is that it has to be what we call germane. It has to be absolutely related to what we are talking about. Typically, these cases will be if somebody makes an amendment to take out an entire line or an entire sentence of something. A secondary amendment that could be seen as acceptable is if somebody wants to add back in part of a sentence, or if somebody wants to add back, if somebody strikes out 3 things after a comma and a list of things, and they say, well, actually, we see this one as being really necessary. That warrants a secondary amendment. However, if somebody is talking about an amendment to get rid of, for example, X, Y, Z, and they say, well, we want to have another amendment that says ice cream should be supplied in all schools of pharmacy in addition to this resolution. That does not warrant a secondary amendment. The secondary, as awesome as that may be, the secondary amendment is really supposed to be germane to the language of the primary amendment that we are talking about. So that's if something gets taken out or if something needs to be put back in, that's when a secondary amendment will be necessary. What we'll be doing is we'll be making sure that everything is germane. If we deem that it is not germane, we will ask that, we will state at that time that it's not really germane to the conversation we're having now, but we will encourage you once we get back to the original motion to propose it as another amendment. So if that happens, don't be discouraged. It doesn't mean that we don't think it should be happening. It just means that we won't be talking about it at this time for the purpose of orderliness and the flow of everything. So I know that that's very kind of convoluted and confusing, but the big thing to remember is that if you have a change to one of the resolutions or you have a change to something that we're talking about, you can file an amendment and then have that amendment by voting to suspend House rules. And in order for that to pass, you need a 2/3 majority. After that, we can talk about whatever the amendment wording and language is, and we'll vote on that. Now, a secondary amendment will only happen if it is directly related to what the amendment is talking about, not necessarily the whole resolution, but just what the amendment is changing. So that's kind of how everything fits together in this whole stepwise process. So the amendment process, if the amendment does pass, then debate and vote will be on the original resolution as amended. So if we added in the phrase, if we added in student pharmacists to something that said pharmacists should be able to do X, Y, Z, and we said pharmacists and student pharmacists should be able to do X, Y, Z, the amendment passed to add that and student pharmacists. When we go back to talk about passing the resolution, we'll be talking on that language. We'll be saying that that will become the new resolution, basically as amendment. If it does not pass, we'll go back to the original wording of pharmacists with no student pharmacists added in. Now, if you would like to end debate, you can actually do what we call calling to question. So you would get up to the microphone, you would wait to be acknowledged, and you would say, Mr. Speaker, Dylan Atkinson, University of Pittsburgh School of Pharmacy, I move to call the previous question. At that point, you will require a second, which means that any of the chapter delegates, and once again, anytime that there is a vote or a second that is needed, only the delegates may participate in that. So anytime that there is a second needed, any of the chapter delegates may shout out second from their chair, and then that will require a 2/3 vote. You have to be at the microphone, and what that does is that stops debates and immediately leads into a vote. So what we do then is if everybody votes to say, yes, we're done with talking about this, we go right into the vote on whatever the language is at that time. Some of the other actions from the microphone, you can request a caucus, which is if you need to go back and talk to your chapter members about something, if it's changed a lot and your chapter hasn't talked about that and you want to make sure you're voting on behalf of them, you can go up to the microphone, wait to be called on, and then request a 2-minute caucus or a 1-minute caucus. We would try not to go too much above 2 minutes simply for the sake of time. You can also request more information. So if you would like more information from somebody in the crowd, once again, you cannot address one of the other delegates. You have to address the chair. So you can go up to the microphone and say, I rise to a point of information, and then explain basically what your question is. And you can also protest the rules. So if you feel as though the House is out of order and we are not following either our rules or the Robert's Rules of Order, you can rise to a point of order and tell us why we're out of order, and we can go right back to how we should be. But if I am doing my job, then this one should not really be used. So when it comes to voting, so we really only use the electronic votes for our elections. So when we're actually voting for people, you'll have a key card that you'll be able to key in your selection. And then for everything else, we use a voice vote. With this, it's usually a majority vote. There is that 2/3 majority vote, which is suspending House rules or calling the previous question that we just talked about. Most of the time, it's a simple 50% plus one vote is the simple majority. And if you feel as though myself as the Speaker of the House, I will be making the call from up on the podium to say whatever it is that I hear, if it's aye or nay, that has the majority. If you feel as though I have called incorrectly, you can yell division. Any one of the chapter delegates, and once again, this is only for chapter delegates, has the ability to call division, and you just shout that out from your chair. And what that does is that forces us to do an electronic ballot to make sure that we actually get the counts correct. So if you feel as though it is not, if you heard it differently than however I heard it, please feel free to shout division from your seat, and we will do an electronic ballot for whatever is being discussed. So we do have a lot of resources available for you. Your regional delegates as well as your policy standing committee members are always there to help you out with whatever your needs may be for this policy process, as well as an annual. We know it's a little bit crazy and there's a lot of things to know, but we will have the Robert's Rules of Order cheat sheet available for you, as well as the House of Delegates guide and the attendees guide to the APhA-ASP House of Delegates. And basically with that, we want to make sure that you're keeping your chapter engaged. We want to make sure that you're not the only one there making all the decisions for your chapter. We want you to be able to go to and talk to your chapter members during that caucus and figure out, you know, how do we feel about this? What is the way that we should be voting? So at that point, I know that that's kind of a lot, and that's very dense information, but I really do hope that I drilled home the points. I have a feeling this is where a lot of the questions are going to come from. But I'll open it up for questions at this time, basically on any of the stuff that we just talked about or anything from before. So I'm going to take a look at any of our typed in questions. And if you have questions, please feel free to type them in or to raise your hand and we can unmute you. Okay. So I see a question about the new business items. Are the new business items ones we have to discuss with our chapter and then propose on behalf of anyone who would like? So with the new business items, typically it would be something that your chapter wants to have come up. You can fill it out on behalf of yourself. We do encourage you to talk to your chapter about it, but the important thing is just to make sure that you fill out everything on the new business form and submit it on time. Because of our rules, we do require that they be submitted in advance enough to be able to review within the new business review committee. So we do encourage discussion within your chapter about whether or not this is an idea that you guys want to stand behind, because once again, as the chapter delegate, your role is to vote on behalf of your chapter, not necessarily on behalf of yourself. Alrighty, and Keith, I'm not seeing any other questions. Do you see any other ones popping up?
No, I think we're good right now.
Alrighty. Well, at this time, I would like to welcome a few very good friends of mine. There are a whole bunch of them kind of on hold right now, on mute. So at this time, I am going to ask all of them to unmute themselves as we kind of go into a mock proposed resolution script. And basically with this will give you an idea of what it'll sound like, what it'll look like when we're actually going through the different resolutions at APhA Annual within the House of Delegates. So without further ado, I do have some friends here. I have Jared Fry, Evan Colmenares, Mary Bradley, Kelsey Gallegos, and Adrian Simmons, who are going to be helping me out with this chapter delegate orientation kind of script that we're talking about for the resolutions. And then immediately after this one, we will also be doing one to kind of go through the elections process. So with that being said, the motion of the recommendation of the APhA-ASP Reference Committee is to adopt the resolution. And the resolution is as reads, APhA-ASP recommends that pharmacists wear lab coats in a pharmacy practice setting. Is there any debate on the reference committee's recommendation? Microphone number 1.
Mr. Speaker, my name is Jared Fry from Wingate University. I would like to suspend House rules for the purpose of an amendment.
Does APhA staff have your wording?
Yes.
Please read the resolution with your proposed amendment.
APhA-ASP recommends that only pharmacists wear lab coats in the pharmacy practice setting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Before we vote to suspend House rules, you may state your reasons for the amendment.
My chapter feels that most healthcare professionals wear lab coats in the professional setting, but we want to make sure that our patients can differentiate the technicians and clerks in the pharmacy from the pharmacists for the purpose of directing medication-related questions, so only pharmacists should wear lab coats.
In order to suspend House rules for the purpose of an amendment, a 2/3 majority is needed. All those in favor of the motion to suspend House rules for the purpose of an amendment, please signify by saying aye. And at this point, everybody in the audience would say aye.
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 Thank you. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The ayes have it. Is there any debate on the proposed amendment? Microphone number 2.
Mr. Speaker, my name is Mary Bradley from the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences. I would like to suspend House rules for the purpose of an amendment.
Because House rules have already been suspended, it is not necessary to suspend House rules again for the purposes of a secondary amendment.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. Then I would like to propose a secondary amendment.
Does APhA staff have your wording?
No.
Please read the resolution with your proposed secondary amendment aloud so APhA staff can add your wording.
APhA-ASP recommends that only pharmacists and student pharmacists wear lab coats in a pharmacy practice setting.
Now that it is on the screen, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. You may now state your reasons for the secondary amendment.
My chapter feels that student pharmacists are professionals as well and should carry similar responsibilities as pharmacists since we are all pharmacists in training. Therefore, we should also be recognized by the distinction of wearing lab coats in our practice settings.
In order to discuss the secondary amendment, a majority vote is needed. All those in favor of opening discussion on the secondary amendment, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The ayes have it. Is there any debate on the secondary amendment? Microphone number 3.
Mr. Speaker, I'm concerned about...
Microphone number 3, could you please state your name and school or college of pharmacy?
I apologize, Mr. Speaker. Adrienne Simmons from Virginia Commonwealth University. I think that we should wear these coats in the pharmacy, but I don't wear a lab coat like I wore in chemistry lab. I want to clarify that these are the professional white coats. Therefore, I'd like to suspend House rules for the purpose of an amendment.
I'm sorry, that motion is out of order. There are already 2 amendments on the floor. We must first address the amendments pending. However, you may propose an amendment after these motions have been addressed. Is there any further discussion regarding the statement on the screen? Seeing none, we will now vote on the secondary amendment as seen on the screen, which reads, APhA-ASP recommends that only student pharmacists and student pharmacists wear lab coats in a pharmacy practice setting. All those in favor of the addition of the wording "and student pharmacists," please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The ayes have it. The secondary amendment has been adopted. We will now return to the discussion on the primary amendment, that reads, APhA-ASP recommends that only pharmacists and student pharmacists wear lab coats in a pharmacy practice setting. Is there any debate? Seeing none, all those in favor of the primary amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The ayes have it. We will now be discussing the reference committee's recommendation to adopt the resolution. Is there any further debate? Microphone number 3.
Mr. Speaker, Adrienne Simmons from Virginia Commonwealth University. I would like to suspend House rules for the purpose of an amendment.
Does APhA staff have your wording?
Yes.
Please read the resolution with your proposed amendment.
APhA-ASP recommends that only student pharmacists and student pharmacists wear white coats in a pharmacy practice setting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Before we vote to suspend House rules, you may state your reasons for the amendment.
My chapter feels that these coats should be specified as the professional type white coat, not the lab coats that many of us wore in chemistry labs in the past.
Mr. Speaker?
Point of order. Chapter Delegate, you must first be recognized by the speaker before beginning to speak. Microphone number 1.
I apologize, Mr. Speaker. Jerry Froth from Wingate University. I'd like to request a caucus to discuss this with my chapter.
I'm sorry, the motion to request a caucus is out of order at this time. We first need to vote on whether or not to suspend House rules for the purpose of an amendment. If House rules are suspended, the floor will open for debate. After all delegates have had an opportunity to speak on this issue, a caucus will be granted if still necessary. In order to suspend House rules for the purpose of an amendment, a 2/3 majority vote is needed. All those in favor of the motion to suspend House rules for the purpose of an amendment, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The ayes have it. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Microphone number 2.
Mr. Speaker, Mary Bradley from the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences. I actually think that this amendment is a really valid point, and my chapter is in support of this.
Thank you. Is there any further debate? Microphone number 1. Microphone number 1.
Mr. Speaker, Jerry Froth from Wingate University. I'd like to request a caucus to discuss this with my chapter.
I will grant a 2-minute caucus. Delegates, please return to your seats when you have finished discussing. And then at this point, basically as an aside to everybody in the crowd, the delegates will consult with their chapters on the proposed wording. And then after the 2 minutes are up, I will say, the House will now come to order. Is there any further debate on the proposed amendment? Seeing none, we will now vote on the proposed amendment. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
The ayes have it.
Division.
A division has been called. Please vote using your electronic devices. All those in favor of the proposed amendment, press 1. All those opposed to the proposed amendment, please press 2. Delegates, you have 15 seconds to vote. 5 seconds. Voting is now closed. And then at this point, we will display the electronic results, and the amendment passes. We will now be discussing the reference committee's recommendation to adopt the resolution. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we will now vote on the recommendation to adopt the resolution. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The ayes have it. The motion carries. Okay, so that is basically what it would sound like if we were in the APhA-ASP House of Delegates. We basically went through a lot of the different things that would happen. We ran into an issue where somebody would have shouted division. We had somebody bring up a secondary amendment that was germane to the language that we were talking about. We had somebody try and bring up a secondary amendment of a secondary amendment, which is not allowed. And we also talked about the 2/3 majority and the necessity in order to suspend House rules of that 2/3 majority. So with all of that being said, that is essentially what it could potentially, I won't say will because we are not guaranteed to have that kind of debate, but that is kind of what it'll sound like in the APhA-ASP House of Delegates. So moving on to elections, a little bit of an overview about that is that we will be electing the 2017 and 2018 APhA-ASP National Executive Committee. We will be electing in 4 offices, and that is the National President-elect, 2 national members at large, and then the National Speaker of the House. So these will be the 4 people who we will be voting on to next year's National Executive Committee. There's a lot of opportunities to learn about each one of the candidates. That's once again available at pharmacists.com/APhA-ASP-House-Delegates, which is where all of this information will be found. The APhA-ASP Meet the Candidates sessions. And for anybody using the mobile app, it has come to our attention that one of the Meet the Candidates sessions is actually missing in the app, but we assure you that it is happening. So Saturday from 2 to 3 in the foyer outside the ballroom, there is a Meet the Candidates session as it says on the website and everything. However, if you're using the mobile app, it is not on there for some reason, so we're looking to try and get that fixed. But just putting that out there for anybody who may be looking. In addition, we will be having the APhA-ASP Open Candidate Review, and this is a great opportunity for you to ask a question from, as a part of the audience, to ask a question of one of the candidates, as well as see the candidate's video and learn a little bit about their answers to some of the questions that they'll be asked. Additionally, they will be making speeches at the APhA-ASP House of Delegates, and this is really one of the times when you want to have feedback from your chapter members, see who went and talked to the candidates in the Meet the Candidates review session, who's met them throughout the weekend, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the important things about the elections is the nomination process, and the nominating committee actually determines the slate. And what I mean by slate is that there will be a slate consisting of 2 candidates for National President-elect, 4 candidates from the National Member-at-Large, and 2 candidates for Speaker of the House. The nominating committee is a representative from each of the regions, and they have an opportunity to sit down with all of the candidates and ask them questions. And basically, they discuss who they want to put on the slate and who they slate to already be on the ballot. And once again, it's 2-4-2, 4 for the National Member-at-Large, as there are 2 of them. And this report will be made available Saturday at 10 o'clock p.m., and then also via the app and the APhA-ASP House of Delegates webpage. However, so what happens when you get slated is that you are automatically nominated, you are automatically on the ballot to be voted on the next day. But that is not the end of it. You can still be nominated from the floor, and candidates can still be nominated from the floor if they fulfill all of the requirements throughout the weekend. And that is up to the chapter delegates. If they see somebody whose name was not slated, but they want them to still be on the ballot and have the opportunity to give their speech, This is an opportunity for them to get up to the microphone, and they would say, Mr. Speaker, Dylan Atkinson, University of Pittsburgh School of Pharmacy, I would like to nominate Michael Murphy for the office of National President-elect. At that time, we would require a second and then a majority vote to put that person on the ballot. Now, the way that the ballot actually works is that it'll go by alphabetical order in the order which for the slate, and then after that it's the order by which they were nominated from the floor. So those who are slated will go first, and then after that it's the order in which they are nominated from the floor if we have enough candidates who are being nominated from the floor for that to happen. A little bit about the voting process is that the National President-elect and the Speaker of the House, a majority vote is required for the election. Should no candidate receive a majority on the first ballot, the name of the candidate with the least number of votes on the first ballot will be omitted from the second ballot. So if nobody gets that 50% plus one vote, then whoever got the least amount of votes will be removed, and we will vote again using the same electronic process for the second ballot. If, once again, we do not have a majority, if nobody has that 50% plus one, then then after that second ballot, we'll go through the exact same procedure. At the end of the third ballot, if nobody receives a majority, it'll be a plurality vote. And what that means is whoever has the most votes. So if we go through 3 times and nobody still has a majority, whoever has the most amount of votes at the end of that third ballot will be the one who was voted in the office. In the case of the tie, I will be the deciding vote, as the rest of the National Executive Committee members will already have a vote in the APhA-ASP House of Delegates, but I do not. So in the case of a tie, I will be the deciding vote. I don't know if that's ever happened in APhA-ASP history, so I don't know. I've never seen it happen. I guess I should say that probably more, but it typically does not come to that. And then for the national members at large, it's a very similar procedure, except each time that you vote, you're actually voting for 2 positions. So you're basically voting twice. And once again, they go through, and if one candidate has a majority, then that candidate shall be declared elected, and the names of the candidates who are not elected on the first ballot will remain on the second ballot, except as stipulated from below. So the name of the candidate with the least number of votes, or if there's a tie, the names of the candidates with the least number of votes on the first ballot shall be omitted from the second ballot. However, if dropping the lowest voted recipients would result in the remaining candidates being elected by default, meaning if there aren't enough people to be running against them, then they would not be dropped off of the ballot. The same procedure will be followed if a third ballot is required. And then once again, if a third ballot does not result in the election of the required numbers, the election shall be decided by a plurality vote. And once again, if there's a tie, it'll go to the APhA-ASP Speaker of the House to cast the deciding vote. So that is a quick overview of the election process, and we will actually be having right after, I'll open it up for questions on basically the way the House functions at that point, and then we'll do a quick mock script of what the officer elections will sound like. Okay. So I see questions from, it looks like staff is answering the questions from Shannon. So, so the amendment forms are due Saturday at 2, but they can make, we don't encourage it, we do ask that you have those amendment forms in. It is very important. However, if something happens where the resolution drastically changes, and for whatever reason you didn't have it in, we probably would entertain an amendment on the floor like that. And then if there are only 2 candidates, does one of them still get removed? So no, in that case what would happen is it would allow for a default. So if there are only 2 candidates on the first ballot, then one of those candidates has to have 50 plus 1% of the vote. And they would have to have the majority, which means that we wouldn't have to drop anybody off. Dropping the person with the least amount of votes off is the process for if nobody has received a majority vote on that first ballot, essentially. So if nobody gets that 50% plus 1 vote on the first ballot, then we would look to drop off the person with the lowest amount. But if only 2 people are running, one person would have to have the majority. Otherwise, it would end up in a tie, and then the deciding vote would go to the APhA-ASP Speaker of the House. So are all delegates on the nominating committee, and if so, when is the committee meeting? So the delegates are not on the nominating committee. The nominating committee is made up of 8 representatives, 1 from each region, and they will be meeting after the first House of Delegates session, and basically they go for as long as they have to and interview the different candidates. So you don't have to worry about being anywhere for the nominating committee. Alrighty, so we just want to go through one more thing with you guys, and then after that we will open it again once more to any questions. So if you have questions now, please continue to write them in. We will get to them just as soon as we're done with this. I'm going to invite all of my friends back up with me as we do a mock national officer election. So with this, we're going to go through basically what the election process is going to sound like and kind of what it'll look like up on the screen. And it'll be kind of similar. You'll hear where we're using Robert's Rules of Order once again, and we'll go through all of those different rules and everything. So to start us off, we will now move on to the APhA-ASP National Officer Elections. The House is prepared to receive the report of the Nominating Committee for the office of the 2017-2018 APhA-ASP National President-elect.
Mr. Speaker, the nominating committee has slated the following 2 individuals for the office of APhA-ASP National President-elect, Kelsey Gallegos and Michael Murphy.
The House has heard the report of the APhA-ASP Nominating Committee for the position of the 2017-2018 APhA-ASP National President-elect. Because the slate came from committee, there is no second required. Nominations from the floor can now be taken if the candidate has complied with all of the requirements outlined in the APhA-ASP House of Delegates Rules of Procedure. That being said, are there any nominations from the floor for the office of APhA-ASP National President-elect? Microphone number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Adrienne Simmons from Virginia Commonwealth University. I would like to nominate Jared Fry for the office of APhA-ASP National President-elect.
Mr. Fry, do you accept the nomination for APhA-ASP National President-elect?
I accept, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Fry has accepted the nomination for the office of National President-elect. Is there a second?
Second.
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 We will now vote to place Mr. Fry on the ballot for the office of National President-elect. All those in favor of placing Mr. Fry on the ballot, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
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 The ayes have it. Mr. Fry will now be the candidate for the office of National President-elect. Are there any further nominations? Microphone number 3.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mary Bradley from the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences, and I would like to nominate Scott Brewster for the office of National President-elect.
Mr. Brewster, do you accept the nomination for National President-elect?
I accept, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Brewster has accepted the nomination for the office of National President-elect. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Second. We will now vote to place Mr. Brewster on the ballot for the office of National President-elect. All those in favor of placing Mr. Brewster on the ballot, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
Nay. The nays have it. Mr. Brewster will not be placed on the ballot as a candidate for the office of National President-elect. Are there any further nominations? Seeing none, nominations for the office of APhA-ASP National President-elect are now closed. Each candidate may address the delegates for a period of time not to exceed 4 minutes. Candidates will address the House in the following order. First, those slated by the nominating committee in alphabetical order, followed by the nominations from the floor in the order in which they were received. And then at this point, we would allow each of the candidates to give their speech and address the House in this order based off of alphabetical order from the slate, meaning Kelsey and Michael. And then Jared was the first one nominated from the floor, so he would be the next one on the ballot and the next one to give his speech. And then after everybody has had their chance to speak, myself as speaker, I will say, I will now grant a 5-minute caucus to discuss the candidates. And then everybody will go off and we'll discuss the candidates for the 5-minute caucus. We'll all come back and I will ask, will the House please come to order? It is time to vote for the office of APhA-ASP National President-elect. Remember, delegates, please submit your electronic ballot by entering only one number on your electronic keypad that corresponds to the candidate listed on the screen. 1, Kelsey Gallegos. 2, Michael Murphy. 3, Jared Fry. And then at this point, everybody would vote. And I would say, have all the votes been cast? Voting for the office of National President-elect is now closed. A majority vote shall be required for the office of National President-elect. And for the sake of this, we will be saying that, so staff will verify all of the ballots. And then if a single candidate does not receive greater than 50% of the votes, which is a simple majority, then the candidate with the lowest amount of votes will be removed, and then we will re-vote. So because we have 3 candidates, we would be able to remove whoever has the lowest amount of votes and then vote once again to get to that majority. So for the sake of this, we'll say that somebody did win and a candidate has been chosen for the office of National President-elect. We will now move on to the office of National Member-at-Large. And then at this point, we will enter into the same procedure for National Member-at-Large. We will not announce who won each of the offices until the very end, and we will announce them all together as the new National Executive Committee. So you guys are going to have to stick around to find out which one of these guys won at annual. So once again, I just want to highlight some of the resources that we have available. This APhA-ASP House of Delegates webpage on pharmacists.com is probably going to be your best friend. I highly recommend to bookmark it, check it, read it over at least 100 times. I'm kidding. Just glance over it, read over it, make sure you familiarize yourself with it. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any of your regional delegates or policy standing committee members, and definitely look back at, we will have a recording of this webinar that we should be posting as well. I'd also like to make a quick announcement for one of our annual fundraisers. So this is our Pause for Vet annual fundraiser. And these t-shirts are going to be $19 at the APhA bookstore. They do read APhA-ASP before spelled with a PH, Awakens. So if you like this t-shirt, 100% of the profits will go towards Pause for Vets. And Pause for Veterans actually provides our nation's combat injured heroes that suffer from a plethora of different conditions with service dogs as well as supplies, therapeutic group sessions, and natural treatment alternatives. So we've continuously donated money to them year after year at the annual meeting. And this year, we encourage everybody to go out and buy one of these t-shirts, as all of the profits do go towards a good cause. And you get a really awesome looking t-shirt out of it. So you're definitely not looking for love in Alderaan places for anybody out there who understands that joke. I was told it was a bad joke, so if it's bad, you can blame Michael Murphy for it. And then also, I want to encourage everybody to join us for our career conversations. So whether you know exactly what lies ahead of you or you're exploring unique options, should join us for a conversation with pharmacy's leaders and innovators. The career hosts will rotate through in basically 20-minute segments, and you can stay for the whole time. You can come and go as you please. You can choose who you want to hear from and schedule it into your day. But you get your questions answered. You can go in and learn about different people's career paths, and as well as gain some insight into potential career options that are available for you. This is going to be located on the Main Street area in the North Lobby in the Convention Center, and it'll actually be the career booth is where you'll be able to find it. So we do encourage you to stop by. These are the times that are available for it, but as you're kind of looking around at all the different things to do at annual, definitely stop by and learn a little bit about different places that you can go with your pharmacy career. So with that, I will once again open it up to any kind of questions that anybody has. So this is actually the last time for questions for this webinar. So if you have them, please feel free to type them in, raise your hand, whatever it may be. We'll leave the lines open for a few minutes to let you guys kind of enter all of your questions in. But I would also like to say thank you to all of the guests who jumped on to this webinar. All of the chapter delegates, first of all, who are taking the time out of your night to learn a little bit more about Robert's Rules of Order, and are showing that initiative and excitement. I hope you're as excited for annual meeting as I am. And then for all of our guests who helped with the scripts, I kind of roped them into doing it. So I probably have to buy them all pizza or something like that. I'm kidding, maybe. But definitely thank you to everybody who helped out with that. So we do have questions rolling in now. Will the PowerPoint be accessible to us after the webinar in addition to the recording? So I'm going to default that one to Keith.
Yep,
and he says, yes, we will post it. Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
Perfect. If you do have any other questions, please feel free to enter them. We'll keep it open for just a few more minutes. And if you have any questions that come up between now and annual, please reach out to any of your regional delegates, standing committee, the policy standing committee members, or you can reach out to me as well, and we would all be happy to answer any of the questions that you do have leading up to annual. But definitely make sure you check out the website. There was a lot of work that went into that to make sure everything is up to date and running smoothly, so it'll be great. So the slides and the recording should be posted. Keith is actually right there right now. He's pointing directly to it. Wow, this is incredible. So it'll be posted right on the web page at APhA-ASP House-Delegates. There's actually a section where you can see it. Right now it's grayed out because we're still recording it, but we will have it recorded and posted on the website shortly. All right. Well, seeing no further questions, thank you all so much for taking the time out of your nights to sit in on this webinar and learn a little bit about how the policy process works at annual meeting. Once again, if you do have any questions, definitely go to the website, reach out to any one of us, and we'd be happy to help out. But you guys are free to go now. You have 15 minutes back in your Thursday night. So have fun, and I will see you in San Francisco.